Hi everyone, my name is Dave and welcome to Extra Credit. This is a new video series that I'm starting which will complement the videos that I normally film in the outdoors. Now before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background information about myself and how I got into this field. So I'm a high school history teacher in my hometown of Thunder Bay, Ontario. And for almost the past 30 years, I've been exploring and researching aspects of local history, in particular, the railway history of this area and specifically abandoned railway lines. So the purpose of this video series is to basically build on that, to allow me to talk a little bit about some topics that we don't always get to in our outdoor videos, to talk a little bit about how I go about some of these explorations, some of the gear that I use, and hopefully give you a little bit better sense of how this all kind of happens. So these videos are going to be similar to the ones that I put up on YouTube of my explorations. They're unscripted. My account isn't monetized. I'm not making any money off of this. I am doing this because I love history and I want to see that history preserved and people become familiar with that history. So what we're going to be taking a look at today, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to be taking a look at how I got into all of this. The title of this episode is The Beginning. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a little bit of my journey in terms of how I got interested in aspects of local history and how I've arrived to the point I am right now. So as I mentioned earlier, this journey for me started 30 years ago, actually more than 30 years ago. My first introduction to specifically the abandoned railway history of this area started back in the year 1990. I was a teenager and I was going to be making my first ever moose hunting trip to property that was owned by friends of the family that was located at a place that I had never heard of called North Lake. And so I didn't even really know where it was. I had kind of a vague idea of where I was going. I knew that it was kind of southwest of the city of Thunder Bay, but I had never really even been down in that area very much. And so I can just remember kind of being sort of this foreign experience going way down into this this part of the area of the district that I hadn't seen before. And when I got there, I'd always had an interest and an appreciation for the outdoors. My parents were fairly outdoorsy people. I wouldn't say that they were hardcore outdoor enthusiasts, but we did quite a bit of things outdoors. We did quite a bit of sort of camping and RVing. I grew up, basically my childhood grew up, my parents had an RV, a trailer, at a place called Lake Chebanwan, which is west of the city of Thunder Bay, about an hour west of the city of Thunder Bay. And I spent a good chunk of my childhood growing up there, exploring the area, kind of taking in a little bit of the history. Again, my parents, specifically my dad, did quite a bit of hunting. I hunted with him, particularly small game. I don't ever remember my father going for anything larger than birds, grouse. But my parents did quite a bit of fishing. We did a lot of berry picking, raspberries, blueberries, and then my favorite was mushroom season in the fall time. But again, this is how I kind of got interested in this. I kind of grew up immersed in this culture. And then, so when I did this trip back in the fall of 1990, it was just sort of a natural extension for me. And so when I arrived at North Lake and we started driving into where the property was, and that was kind of a bit of a journey in and itself. People began sort of mentioning to me that what we were driving on was an abandoned railway line. And I was kind of, taken aback, like, this was a railway line. There was actually, trains that used to run through this area. And then, as I spent the weekend there and I began sort of looking around, you started seeing some vestiges of that history. So the property that these friends of the family owned at one time was a construction camp on the railway line. And then subsequently, there was a family that homesteaded there for many, many years, and the friends of the family actually purchased that property off the last member of the family that was living there, and that family was known as the Bishop family. And for a number of years, they actually had constructed a sawmill and had a sawmill operation on North Lake. So North Lake on the railway is about 71 miles from the city of Port Arthur, which is now part of the city of Thunder Bay. And so there was a station that had been built at North Lake, just west of where the property was. Sorry, just east of where the property was. And the station was no longer standing; it had come down. Due to neglect, but there was obviously still the remains of the station. There was a coal bunker that was there. There was still coal in the bunker. And then in the 1970s, a local group had actually tried to save the station. And unfortunately, and I'm not going to get into this because it's a fairly elaborate story. Maybe in another episode I'll do that. They were not able to save the station, but what they did do is they were able to get money to construct a replica about a mile to the east of the original station location on a nearby lake called Addy Lake, right on the railway grade. And so I can remember seeing that replica and again sort of being intrigued by it and seeing the remains of the original station and the coal bunker, and that just sort of certainly intrigued by it all. And, I just, every year that I went back every year after that. And sort of my interest and my curiosity was piqued by all these things that I was seeing. And then, the year after that first trip, a local snowmobile club actually went through and opened up the railway grade to the west of the property along North Lake and into Gunflint Lake. And I can remember exploring part of that previously had not been open, walking part of that, and then in other times actually taking a boat and going further down the lake and seeing more of it and just being absolutely, awestruck by the history and the nature that I was seeing. And then how this all kind of played out later on was about 4 years later. I was in university, and summer rolls around, and I was working in the summer, and you're not working all the time, and I started to think, it would really be neat to kind of learn a little bit more about the history of that area that I was in, this railway line that, I had been walking on and experiencing for the past number of years. And so, I took a trip to the local library and, went to go find some books on it, and was kind of shocked to know at the time, there is a book out there now, but at the time there was no books on this. There was no information about this. And so, I started digging and I started researching, and then I wanted to see the railway line for myself, not just the part that I had seen down by North Lake, the rest of it, where it had actually gone from what was at the time the city of Port Arthur, and then also the adjacent city of Fort William, through down to North Lake and its terminus at Gunflint Lake. And so I began taking trips and exploring parts of the grade, and I just sort of became enraptured by that. And so what I'm going to do right now, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm going to show you a few images of those early years, going back to the early 90s and those first few trips to North Lake, and then subsequently some of my early explorations of the railway line, of the Port Arthur, Duluth and Western Railway, or the PD Railway as it's kind of referred to locally. And so we'll take a look at a few pictures, and you'll kind of see a little bit of that early interest that I had in this railway line and the history of it. So this photo here was taken in the early 90s. I'm not sure exactly what year, but it is east of North Lake on the railway grade, and it's probably one of the first pictures that I took of the railway in those early years of traveling into that area. You can see it's fall time, and looks like maybe there's some snow coming down on the ground. So on those earliest trips to North Lake, this is one of the first things that I would have seen. This is actually a reconstruction of the North Lake station on Addy Lake. Now, unfortunately, this structure is no longer around, but it's one of those things that really kind of got me interested in the history of the railway in that area. I'm really struggling with this picture. It's one of my earliest trips to North Lake during hunting season. Unfortunately, I can't figure out the year of the picture. I'm not wearing glasses, so I want to say it's after 1993 when I started wearing contacts. But the gun doesn't match. I would have had a different gun by this point, and so I'm not kind of sure the year, but certainly one of my earliest photos of the area.
So this is one of the first pictures I ever took of the grade of the Port Arthur, Duluth, and Western when I first started exploring it in 1994. This is taken just west of Roslyn, and it was probably taken in late April of early May of 1994. So this is one of my favorite railway pictures. So this was taken in August of 1997. I'm on Gunflint Lake at the Gunflint Cross, which commemorates the death of a worker while they were building the railway. And so this was part of a week-long exploration that I was doing of the railway line that year, both in Canada and the United States, and it was quite the great adventure.
So after I started exploring the railway line, one of the next things that I began to do, and then that first year, I actually did almost all of the railway line, basically right from where it started in the city of Thunder Bay, all the way down right to its Canadian terminus at the end of Gunflint Lake. I made kind of a very interesting trip because it wasn't very easy to get to on the Canadian side. There were some geographical challenges that I had to deal with. And so after that first year, I continued to research the railway line. I continued to explore the railway line. And then starting in 1997, I may have done this beforehand, but starting in 1997, I decided that I wanted to kind of go beyond what I had been doing. And so on those early explorations, that first year in 1994, I had basically taken pictures of the whole line, laboriously taking a camera. And back then we had, there wasn't digital, there was film, taking pictures. And I would carry a topographic map with me, and I would mark on the topographic map roughly where I had taken the pictures. And so I wanted to go beyond. I wanted to, because oftentimes those two-dimensional pictures don't really sort of tell a very good story. And so I started taking a video camera with me, and I started videotaping and videotaping back then, recording parts of the grade, some of the more notable locations that can be found. And so some of the ones that kind of come to my mind, there was an area around Nollaloo, or just east of Nollaloo, which had a concrete bridge, or at least the abutments of the bridge were made out of concrete, which was very unusual for this line. There were telegraph poles and the remains of some of the other bridges, and that was an early episode. And then later that year, in the summer of 1997, I actually made another trip, a week-long trip to North Lake, and I spent a week out there, and I actually explored not only the parts of the Port Arthur, Duluth, and Western Railway grade. I actually explored an adjacent railway line, a logging line that had been built by the Pigeon River Lumber Company called the Gunflint in Lake Superior. And that was actually located in Minnesota. And so there was a little bit of logistics in there, crossing the border and making that video. And that was back when, the border restrictions weren't maybe as tight as they are now. But certainly that kind of got me interested in making videos of the line. And that continued onwards. The next year I made a trip into Minnesota, my first trip to explore the Minnesota portion of the line. And I recorded, the railway grade and some of the potential iron mines that were supposed to have opened up. And that really kind of triggered that passion in me. And I kind of got away from a lot of my railway explorations for a while there. I met my current wife. We got married. We had some kids. And, when your kids are a little bit younger, you don't really have time to do explorations and things like that. You're a little bit busy with parenting duties. But probably about 10 years ago, or maybe 11 years ago, around about 2010, I began sort of re-exploring the railway line. Technology had changed. I was taking a GPS with me. I was trying to gather GPS data of the railway line. And at the same time, I started getting back into recording parts of the railway line. And then from that point onwards, I decided that I wanted to try to record as many parts of the railway line as I could. And so this tradition of sort of making the videos continued onwards. And I kept doing that sort of year after year after year. And the technology evolved as well. At first I was using the video capabilities on my SLR camera. And, I found that was okay, but it wasn't sort of producing some of the results that I wanted. And then eventually I purchased a really good video camera, the one that I was using in the first place after the SLR. That one unfortunately broke, so I bought another one, and that served me well for a number of years. And then towards the end of the summer of 2019, I actually, my son had received a GoPro for his birthday, and so I actually tried it out and used it a little bit. And so then I went out and purchased my own GoPro. And so it was and I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the later episodes, but it was a 4K capable camera. And that really kind of accelerated why I wanted to do this and doing the explorations, right? I was sort of really impressed by the images that I was getting. And then sort of things kind of took off from there as I began exploring some of the other railway lines, and then deciding that it was rather slow, kind of walking traditionally how I had done them, kind of walking along the grade. That maybe biking would be the most ideal type of thing to do. And so that's what kind of morphed into what I've been doing a lot of right now, is basically using my bicycle to basically aid in the recording, allowing me to cover a great deal of ground. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you some examples of some of the videos that I've shot over the years, starting way back in 1997 with some images from North Lake, and then later on some images from Minnesota, and then some images some recordings that I just did just this past fall.
So this is some video that I shot on that 1997 trip to the area around North Lake and Gunflint. So this is the remains of the North Lake Station as they would have appeared in 1997. So again, this is what I kind of recollect. There was a clearing where the station was. You can see a lot of the remains of the station building itself. Now, unfortunately, that's all gone. I was actually there just this past year, so in May of 2020, and all of this is gone. The boards have just completely deteriorated, and everything has just absolutely disappeared. So it's really sort of sad that all of that history is gone, and I'm glad that I was able to see it before it disappeared. Now, this part here is actually the coal bunker at North Lake, and at the time it was in much better shape. Again, today the coal is still there, but the wood structure of the bunker is just completely deteriorated, and obviously that's going to happen since it was last abandoned in 1923. So this piece of video here was shot in 2014 on the Minnesota portion of the railway line. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is the distance of this trestle that was built. That was about a 400-foot trestle, and so I'm standing on the one side talking through a wireless mic and hopefully trying to relay the distance that's involved. And always loved traveling on this Minnesota portion of the railway line. So this last piece of video was actually shot last fall near Pass Lake, actually just to the east of the Blend River Viaduct. And it's actually in the opening montage of the video series. And what we have here is actually about a half-a-mile section where the rails were left in place on the former Canadian Northern CN line. And it's really kind of neat to ride your bike over it with the ties still in place.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed those video clips. So this essentially brings us to the end of this first episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed me talking a little bit about this journey that I've gone through for the past 30 years, beginning with my first sort of introduction to some of the history of this area down at North Lake, and where I am today in some of the explorations that I'm doing. I do have a number of episodes planned for the futures. I have some ideas of what I'm going to be talking about and taking a look at. Again, I'm going to be looking at some aspects of local history, some of the topics that I'm personally researching, some of the material and some of the gear that I use on these explorations. If you have any ideas in terms of what you would like me to talk about, or you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments, or you can reach out to me. I do have a website, and you'll see the website address at the end of this video. I'm also on social media, and so you can follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. And so again, you'll see those on the screen. Feel free to take a look at some of my other videos and some of my other explorations of some of the area history. And for now, I will basically say thank you for tuning in, and look forward to an episode coming probably every month from now going forward into the future. So long, everyone.